by myself because I am not sure where the lovely Marie-France is right now. So I figured I was just going to go live because people are probably waiting for the show. And hopefully she arrives and we get to have a conversation about, are we all influencers? But I thought, well, hey, this is a conversation for us who are live as well. And I see the wonderful Robert Berry. Thanks for joining me, my friend. So while we wait, why not just have a conversation about what some people think influence is, and why maybe people stay in the mindset of they are not influencers. So because it's just me today, and I think for those of you who have been here before, you will know this about me, I am not really a huge fan of talking to myself. So very minimally, I'm talking to you, Robert. We're talking to each other. Oh, Sam. Hi, Sam. Sam is here too. Welcome to the conversation, peeps. And so I would love to hear from the crowd that's here today. What does influence mean to you versus what does influencer mean to you? Because, oh, Robert, do you want to hop on? Yes, you know what? I'm totally doing this. Rob and Sam, because you are here, why not? This is how we do. I'm going to send you both the link and you guys can hop on if you want. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but that would be cool. Oh, apparently I know lots of people named Robert. Robert, I will send you the link. Sam, I'm also going to send you the link. That's a name. You guys have the same problem when you like pressure type and then you can't type at all what you were trying to do. Oh, Mike. Hi, Mike. Oh, Michelle is here too. You guys are killing it. Yes, we're moving with conviction. Oh, Sam, that's okay. You don't have to. I think Robert said he could. And hopefully Marie-France still shows up. But equally, I still want to hear from those of you who are in the audience today. What does influence mean to you versus what does an influencer look like? Because this is going to be the fun part of the conversation today. There's likely, I mean, I had this definition of what it looks like to be an influencer, right? And we live in this social media environment where people are called an influencer, and society or the internet will say that person is an influencer. So we see that and then we compare it to ourselves. And then there's probably some misalignments. So this is going to be an opportunity for us all to explore what is this version I have in my brain of what an influencer looks like versus what do I look like? How do I show up online? How do I show up in my work? Hi, Rob. Thanks for volunteering to just be on live today.
Well, I mean, let's have a conversation. Nah, this is fun. This is fun. Let me get myself together though.
Yes. Get the hair all did. This is awesome. And again, hopefully Marie-France is just running late. Unfortunately, we ran up on a day where I have to be on time, which is very unusual for me. No worries, Mike. Take your call and come back.
So you're saying normally you're late? I mean, this.
What? Tracy never finishes this LinkedIn live on time. Are you new here? Yeah, I'm brutal because the point of this is to have a good conversation, and good conversations for me are like very difficult to wrap up because it's fun and I want to stay in the conversation. So, yes. Rob, we're talking about influencers. Do you want to share with us what your brain says an influencer looks like?
You know, for me, an influencer is anyone that can convince someone to do something. I mean, real simple. I'm from Alabama, so I'm very simple. But I think there is a difference between having influence and being an influencer. I think nowadays, because of social media, everybody calls themselves an influencer simply because they have a lot of followers. And I don't think followers actually equates to the real influence that you have. And then I think there's a difference between being a social influencer and being a business influencer. Those are different things, right? That require different skill sets. So, where do you want to go with this? I mean, we can go multiple ways.
Well, and I think really where I'd like to start is this concept of like a social media influencer, because I think this is a thing that kind of poisons everybody else's opinion of how they can be an influencer in their home, in their business, in their community, in their little corner of LinkedIn. And we think that like I wouldn't give myself the title of influencer because that is what an influencer looks like. So is that something that you've experienced, Rob? Because I know you do. I mean, like I would call you an influencer. What? It's hard. I mean, we'll talk about the like personal receiving of these things later on in the show. But what as you kind of built your personal brand, how did your relationship with the word influencer change?
The word influencer scares me because of the way that it is tossed around on social media. For me, my ultimate goal for getting on social media, I had a couple of goals. First goal was to just spread my thoughts to other people in attempts to help them out. And then my second thought was, in spreading my thoughts, I could learn from other people, because the best teachers are learners too, right? When you teach someone something, you also learn at the same time. And so for me, that was kind of what an influencer, quote unquote, should be on social media. Now, from a business standpoint, you're trying to influence people to do the right thing, whatever the right thing is for whatever organization you're working for. But what I see now in social media is whoever has an opinion about something and can spread it the widest and the furthest, regardless of truth or fact. So that scares the heck out of me.
And this is actually I think the fun part of these definitions, right? Because when we have these perspectives that an influencer doesn't necessarily have to be a thought leader or somebody
Right.
who's out to, like, I have that same definition of you, Rob, as the like I attempt to help other people. I do have a unique way, a unique perspective on what that looks like. And there's people who follow me because they like that, or there's people who don't follow me because they don't like that. But we look at these, I mean, always like YouTube stars and TikTok stars, and they're doing a thing, but almost all of them are doing like their thing, right? And we think like, oh, that's what it looks like. I need 1 million followers to be an influencer. But like for me, I have a 5-year-old at home. One of he is the person I influence the most. Right? I have the most time I spend with him, and he can either benefit from my presence or be negatively impacted by my presence. And I think in the realm of social influencers, we don't really think about that like energy transfer, right? We start to think about, what's this number? I need to have this number and this many viewers and this many whatever. And then we forget that people are actually attracted to and benefit from a specific energy. I think this is the number one reason why Gary Vee is so huge. And there's been things lately about how he copies his content and all of these things. I mean, nothing in the world is new, right? This is just other people's versions of it, other people's presentations of it. And if it's meaningful to the recipient, then it's meaningful to the recipient. Let's not negate all of that. Yeah, maybe there's some copyright infringements. That's for other people to decide. But it doesn't change that energy transfer. And I think that there's a lot in the realm of influence that is tied into that energy. It's interesting because when I think of energy and I look at like what you said, Rob, I attempt to help and I learn from others. That's an energy. That's an energy you show up with. And there's a possibility for you to share that with other people and influence them. Okay, I have a maybe tricky direction I want to go with this, but I want to share some of the comments that have come in first. So sorry, Michelle. It is early for me still. My mouth doesn't want to work. Being able to win people's trust and guide their thoughts. I really liked that guide their thoughts piece, because I think a lot of times when we think about influence, we think about convincing, we think about persuasion, and there's maybe some different energy that goes into those things.
So now I'll add to that, and I like what she said, but I don't want to take away from it. But I don't think you're actually guiding people's thoughts. I think you're really guiding their actions. Because if you think about it, you can influence someone to do something even if they're thinking differently from you. You've just convinced them in a short period of time that what you are asking them to do is more important than what they actually think, feel, or believe. Sometimes it's not always that they have the same thought as you. You're really guiding their actions. And I think that's what influence is. Because think about it. We all have different opinions about things. We all have different thoughts. But realistically, we should actually be working, and I'm speaking very generically, we should all be working towards a common goal, and that's the betterment of society as a whole, regardless of what we're doing. So within that, some people have different religious affiliations, some people aren't religious, some people have different ethnic backgrounds, some people have different socioeconomic backgrounds, and we think a specific way. Right? People who grew up poor are going to think differently from someone who grew up rich. But I think we can all agree that children should be protected, that we should not murder people. So it's the actions that we're actually I mean, I went to an extent there, right?
The number of times that comes up on this show is kind of shocking. Don't murder people. Well, and I think this is actually like one of the things Andrew is sharing in the chat, is that a social influencer is a social teacher.
Okay.
And I would add on to that, Rob, social learner as well.
Okay. But let me say something, and I want to see what you think about this now. So I think a social media, quote unquote, in air quotes, influencer is not really an influencer if they aren't teaching someone something. What they are is an entertainer.
And this is actually interesting too, because I'm writing this down because I want to make sure my brain doesn't take me away from this. There's like the entertainment industry, right? People get paid a lot of money to be professional actors. And I always say, like, I couldn't be a professional actor. I like high five to those people, because I actually believe that to pretend that you're someone else all the time is a very hard thing to do. And
But
so
could you be an amateur actor? That's the
I think I'm an amateur joke teller. I'm an amateur many things. Amateur singer. I can be a lot of amateur things. Let's not go there. But there is that difference between entertainer and Rob. Do you think that we have maybe muddled the water using the word influencer when really what we're trying to say is entertainer?
Oh, absolutely. Because okay, so let's think about this. And I know some people are going to get on to me when I say what I'm about to say. But let's just look at Miss Kim Kardashian, for example. You know, millions of followers on social media. And look, let's be frank. The woman started off as the executive assistant for Paris Hilton, who was another quote unquote influencer. And then she made this interesting movie that catapulted her to fame. And now all of a sudden, we've taken that and transferred this person. And I'm not saying she's a bad person for what she's doing now, but we've taken this and catapulted this person into this activist for various causes. Now, that doesn't take away from the good things that she is doing now. However, if you look at where it started from entertaining. Heck, her family had a reality show where they entertained. There was no influence going on there, unless you want to talk about bad influences from the things that they taught people not to do. So, yeah, I mean, these people are entertainers. And again, not taking away from the quote unquote talent that it takes to entertain. And I guess to a certain extent, maybe some of the things that they have done created a bad influence on other people. You know, like that one bad influence your child has, the one kid that you don't like. I don't like little Johnny. It's a bad. So maybe
I
to
feel
that
like
extent,
Johnny ends up in that category unfairly. There's probably
Johnny is
some very
always
good
there.
Johnnies. This is interesting though too, because like I think about all of the like actors in Hollywood, and a lot of them have nonprofit organizations or spend a lot of time doing good things with their money, and they're entertainers, right? So it's not that
Right.
you can't be a good human and be an entertainer. I went to school with a guy who was a magician, like a stage magician, and I was like, this is the coolest thing. And I went to his show and I was like, this is neat. His job still today, if you look him up on LinkedIn, corporate magician. And I'm like, he's owned the fact that he's an entertainer. I'm an entertainer. I entertain people as my job. And that doesn't mean that there's something bad about you. But I think this is an interesting point, that when we look at social influencers, a lot of times they're actually entertainers and they're entertaining us, and people like to be entertained, right? That's why you have a lot of followers, because I like Paul Rudd. I follow him on Instagram, right? Like that. And he's an entertainer.
Yeah.
And he had some very smart things to say about wearing a mask during the pandemic. Like, so,
and I think it almost becomes a point where because you're an entertainer and because you have a huge following, now you have these things that you've been wanting to say for so long, and because you have the following, now some of them then translate that into becoming a quote unquote influencer. So again, not saying that either is bad or good, but there is a distinct difference, because there are some social media influencers, loosely using the term, who really only entertain. Then there are some who take the social media audience that they've garnered, and now they say, okay, I want to actually be a social influencer, and here's the cause that I want to put my social media might behind.
and I think that like that's what Sam is sharing too, right? I think people can
Yeah.
use their fame
Thank
to
you, Sam.
influence.
You said it a lot better than I did.
I think two different ways. Different people absorb information in different ways. But and this is the point, right? But I do think then there's an intention there, right? Am I using my fame to say, okay, I'm going to use Ryan Reynolds as an example, because he's like
good example.
Canada's baby. We love him. Everyone in Canada loves him. He's Canadian. You guys can't have him. He's Canadian.
We're gonna adopt him.
No, we won't let you. But there's like, so he has an alcohol brand, right? He uses his fame to promote that, right? And not just that. I'm going somewhere else with this, but that's one thing that he promotes, right? So like, yes, you can use your fame to influence people to buy a certain brand, right? You can also use your fame. So something, and I don't know if this was like widely publicized, but there was a like young kid, and I can't remember, one of the like muscular dystrophy diseases, and his like make a wish was to meet Ryan Reynolds. So they made it happen. But then Ryan Reynolds like took it upon himself to make this GoFundMe account. Van Wilder. No, that was probably the weakest point in his career. To like, and this kid ended up with like $1 million or something in his GoFundMe because Ryan Reynolds decided to promote it, and just like and I think he did like one post on his Instagram account or something, and then everybody was like, we need to support this kid. So yes, you can use your fame for influence. You can also use your fame for other things, but fame and influence they're not connected unless you connect them. Right. And Mark is flipping it on its head and saying people can use their influence to fame. That's the flip side. So how would you like, even in, I mean, Rob, you and I wouldn't call us famous. Like, we're not famous.
Far from it.
Dan Roth is like kind of famous. Hi, Dan. Nice to see you.
He's kind of famous in his own mind. No, I'm just kidding. I love that.
But I think this is an interesting thing because one of my like favorite quotes from Mel Robbins, which I referenced earlier on today in a call with a new peep, was that it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. So now she's famous, but over this program of 10 years of building her business, she created influence with specific people who were trying to do specific things. And that influence turned into fame. Eventually, Brené Brown is another person that I would put into that category, right? They did the thing that they wanted to do, and then they became famous. Oh, thanks, Sam. I'm famous to Sam.
Well, but here's the thing, though. I think once you start helping people, you can help enough people to where you just automatically become famous. I mean, and I know that sounds a little cheesy, but think about it. Once you start helping one person and then another and then another, and then the word spreads, and then that kind of influence makes you famous.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too. So let's talk about fame for a second, because influence, fame, these kinds of things are kind of together. I know for me, one of the things that I have always thought as I'm building my business is like, I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm not trying to help these people so that in 10 years from now, I will be an overnight success and be famous. That's not my goal. But how do you think that impacts people's ability to influence if we're like limiting our ability to think that like one day this might make us famous?
Ooh. Oh, wow. Okay. Say that again. That's a tough one.
So for me, like I would say like these are the like sneaky mindset things that we don't pay attention to, right? It's like if I think I'm not in this for the fame, then does that actually detract from my ability to influence people?
Oh, I don't think so. I think people who don't think about fame just kind of do it, whatever it is, and yeah, I think people who aren't famous just kind of do whatever it is that they do.
And that's interesting too, because like when I think about actors, right? Like just people act, they do what they do, right? And they become famous or they don't become famous. I think it's maybe just like, so one of the examples I'll give is that like when I started my business, I saw a lot of business influencers, or I'll call them social media influencers in the entrepreneurship arena, and are talking about making $1 million, right? And so in my brain, what happened was that making $1 million equals looking like this person and having their same life and showing up that way, right? So then I said, I will never do that. And so my mind also said, I will never make $1 million. And so like, this is why I'm thinking, yeah, I go deep on Thursday mornings.
So now I like where you're going here, because I think we've been tricked, because, okay, so I'm going to say a phrase and I want you to complete that phrase, right?
Okay.
Rich and
Poor.
Okay. I was going with rich and famous.
Rich and famous.
But think about it though.
I got it after the fact.
but no.
My brain was thinking of opposites.
Man, that's an epic failure. You're gonna have to clip this out. But
no, that's the fun part. This is why this is authentic
think about it though. Oftentimes we're told rich and famous, but there are quite a few rich people who aren't famous at all. And there are quite a few people who don't want to be famous. As a matter of fact, if you were to ask me fame or rich, give me rich any day. I don't care. Look, I'd rather be rich and no one knows who I am and I can just sip a pina colada on my private island. Okay. So, but growing up, I want to be rich and famous. What do you want to be when you grow up? Rich and famous. And I think we equate the two together. So from a psychological standpoint, a lot of people think that if they get fame, then it will equate to riches. Now, here's what's funny. Social media has thrown a really big wrinkle into that, because there's so many people who go viral and become quote unquote famous that are still dirt poor because they go viral for doing stupid stuff.
Fair. Or it's even like, I'm thinking of not as much stupid stuff, but so if anybody's seen the show Lego Masters, they had the last season had these two like TikTok influencer Lego guys, and they're like 15, 16 years old, right? And what they do is they build Lego on their channel, which is fine for us Lego fans, but maybe not so much for other people. But you can be famous for that and not make hardly any money. So this is a good point. And oh my gosh, okay. Thank you everyone for blowing up the chat, because I feel really bad. Andrew has a couple things that I want to go back to, but let's address what's happening in the conversation right now. Mark is sharing, you may get your island, but you're going to get bitten by a snake and die. Depends where your island is. You could have an island in Canada and there's very few snakes, although then you also have winter. So
but let me also say, I think Mark missed my point, because what he's saying is, I agree with him when he says money is not everything. He missed my entire point. My entire point was, I don't want the fame. If I had to choose, just give me the money without being famous. A lot of people want to be well known by everyone, regardless, at all costs, even if it's for doing something stupid. And I would rather just be quiet and sit in the background and be paid for what it is that I do, rather than being famous for something stupid. That was my whole point. Not that, hey, just I want money and I'm money hungry. Because I agree with you, money is not everything. The point was, if I had to choose between being famous or having money based on what it is that I do for a living, I would rather have the money than to be famous for something stupid, like social media influencers sometimes.
It's true, right? And I think this is like Dan is making a comment about people that go viral and are dirt poor because they don't know how to capitalize on their virality. But I think this is very tied into what Jessica is saying about extrinsic. Oh, that's a hard word for me in the morning. Extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation, right? So if we're motivated by the money and the fame, versus if we're motivated by our why and what we're trying to help people to do, then what, Robert, you're talking about is like, in your scenario, I'm being rewarded for my sharing with people by money instead of fame. But I'm not out there just to be rich either. I'm out there to help people. And I do think that is it ties into, yes, Andrew likes to hang out on the digital download with me, where I'm always talking about just do the thing. and this is when we're talking about just doing the thing, right? This, again, money and fame are results. Like you get those, you earn those, right? You don't earn those by just sitting on your couch doing nothing, right? And you don't earn bad fame that way either. You have to very minimally record something stupid that you did and put it on the internet to get famous, right? And so there is this concept of doing. No, we didn't lose the I'm bringing it back, Sam.
I'm glad you are.
This is how I do. This is how exploratory conversations work. And so what we're here today is we're exploring the relationship between influence and fame. And money. Can you really have the conversation about fame without having the conversation about money? I don't think so, because these things in humans' brains are intricately linked to each other. We can't separate them. So when we're talking about influence, and Sam asked a good question earlier up about what is famous, right? How many followers do you need to become famous? And even that question in itself is really interesting to me now, because it's not. I end up using Hitler a lot as an example on the show, because not that I agreed with what he did, but he had a very strong personal brand and was totally famous.
Yep.
Right? So let's use Hitler as an example here. Adolf Hitler, in case you know any other Hitlers. I don't know. I'm sure there's people who still have that name. He didn't have any social media followers, right? He lived in a time where you actually couldn't quantify the number of followers that you have, right? He probably thought it was the entire German population. But he actually became famous within a very small group of people before he felt like he had the confidence to go big and be like, I'm going to be the chancellor or whatever of Germany. And so I think it's really interesting to think about this question of what is famous, right? What are your thoughts on the question of what is famous, Robert?
Yeah, I think if we're talking literal and clinical, right? Famous would be a lot of people know who you are. Now, when I was younger, I used to think famous was a lot of people knowing, liking, and trusting you, right? We hear that all the time. When I was young as a kid, right? That's what I thought famous was. But now, as you pointed out, Hitler is famous. Not saying that you agree with what he did, because he was definitely a psycho,
And
but
maybe
he was
now he's infamous, but at the time he was famous.
right, right. Well, but the other thing too, though, is in being famous, he obviously got some people to follow him willingly, but then I would say that he also had some followers by force. And so once he had some willing followers, he created an echo chamber where a lot of people agreed with the stupid crap that he believed. And once you get enough people to follow your stupidity, then you can almost create some followers by force. And if you think about it, without now take away the impact that he had, you see some of those same things happening now with social media, where you have a lot of things that are spread that are not true, and a lot of people believe those things that are not true, and a lot of people take action on those things that are not true. Now, I don't think it's a whole lot of follower by force nowadays. I think it's follower by manipulation, because you get people to believe the things that you believe and spout out the rhetoric that you spout out. But it's similar in concept. Um,
It's interesting too, because this actually very conveniently ties back to Andrew's comment way long time ago that was talking about influencers sound too much like mind control.
yeah,
The best social influencers give followers information regarding a subject and advise of the good point and also the pitfalls, because
yes,
this is pros and cons of everything. But I think this is just, I've never thought about this in the Hitler example, but it's totally true, right? You have your beliefs and you share them enough so you get this core of like really strong supporters who think you're famous, right? And then you almost like you earn the ability to create followers by force, right? Like, I'm gonna force you to follow this and to believe this. And again, there's like an extrinsic and intrinsic motivation breakdown we have in the Hitler example. But I think it's also important to look at that, right? When we are actually creating based on teaching, and we are, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of something else because the phrase that came to mind is like building influence, right? Like, we don't always know that we're doing that, right? So I want to like come back again to Sam's question about how do we influence without fame. Well, I believe I'm an influencer. My job, as far as I see it, is to show up and to show people that there's another way, a more empowering way to think about your life, your business, how you show up, right?
yeah,
And I do that because my long-term someday goal is for the world to have had more people who own their personal brand because I was here, right? And this is how I do it. But it's like, oh, all of you in this chat know me. I've had people tag me on social media who I don't know, who say like, I like to follow what Tracy Borison says, blah, 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 right? Like that comes because I show up and I give what I feel like is meaningful for me to give, right? I'm
yeah,
not here just giving random marketing information that you can find elsewhere on the internet. I'm sharing my perspective, what I believe,
yeah,
and it gives people who believe the same thing to join me, right? Just yes, it is an idea that people buy into, and equally, I don't even know, way more people who don't buy into my ideas,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone is
Yeah.
like, oh, look at all these people that buy into Tracy's idea. What if there's like 12 people here?
But when you think about it though, influence is kind of like, and I'm going to use a Star Wars reference. You know I have to. It's like the Force. There's a good side and there's a bad side, and sometimes within that we knowingly use it for good or we knowingly use it for bad, and then sometimes we unknowingly use it for good and sometimes we unknowingly use it for bad. And so with that said though, back to the title of the show though, the Are We All Influencers conversation, I think we are all influencers because to a certain extent, even if you influence one person, you're still an influencer. And when you said something earlier that really struck me, you said you have a 4-year-old. Well, yeah, every parent is the biggest influencer in your child's life. And I think to that extent, your influence is really continuous because you talk about the ripple effect, right? The things that you teach your children, they'll teach their children or someone else, or the things like, for example, in a lot of my social media posts, I talk about my grandmother a lot. I say my grandmother used to say this and my grandmother used to say that. And people were like, oh, she's a wise woman. Or, some people will say, well, we can see where you learned some of your values from. And when you think about it, the fact that I learned a lot of things from my grandmother, and then I turn around and I say these things, it's like the ripple effect. So her values, beliefs, morals, ethics, they were imparted in me. And then hopefully by the way I present myself, I will impart them in others, even if it's just one person. And my one of my grandmothers just died 2 weeks ago, and I keep thinking about that. So the first one died in 2017, and I was hit really hard because I was really close with that one. But I notice when I'm talking to people, I'll think about something that she used to say to me, or I'll even say it outright. Yeah, my grandmother used to say, because I said something the other day without getting too far off the tangent. Somebody said, well, that's just common sense. And I was like, well, my grandmother used to say, if common sense were common, everybody would have it. And then I just stopped because, so to that extent, back to the point, we are all influencers simply by taking in information from other people, dissecting that information, analyzing that information, and then reacting to that information. We're influencing people, hopefully in a good way, every day.
Mhm. And this is like, I think about my husband in this scenario, right? Because he has a LinkedIn profile because he works in corporate, but if I asked him, would you consider yourself an influencer? He would say no. And I would say that how he influences me greatly influences how I show up for other people. Like the space he creates for me, the listening he does for me, like that is influential. It's influential on our son as well, right? And I think when we think about being an influencer, we forget that we have all of these little moments that anybody who's a big influencer now took advantage of the little moments to influence in the way they knew they could. And that built up over time. And to the point where I can actually say with confidence, I consider myself an influencer and I have never gone viral. And maybe I will, maybe I won't, but that doesn't mean that I can't show up and influence, share what I know, share what I've learned, learn from other people, that I can't share that beingness with people every day. And that influences, hopefully this doesn't is okay, Jessica, you put it in the chat. But Jessica sharing, your mood is infectious, I needed a pick me up and I saw you were live. That's influence, right? That's energy sharing. That's giving what you can, not giving what you can't, but giving what you can, which is why I actually decided to go live today, even though Marie-France hopefully is fine, and I will check on her later. But because I felt like this was something I could give. And then Rob was like, a volunteer. And that was something he felt he could give. And it has impacted other people. And that is really, at the end of the day, is what influence is. And
it's the little ripples.
Little
It's the, I mean, literally it's the little ripples. I gotta give you an example. When you see people, for me, I get one of my pet peeves is when you go to the grocery store and people don't put their shopping cart back in the little thing, right? I just it it just bothers me because you could ding somebody else's car, or it could roll out into the street and cause a crash, and the things is they're just right there. Just do it. So anyway,
and it's interesting because I have my own perspective on this. Like, my grandma, who's 84, uses the cart as like a walker. And so when she puts the groceries in her car, if she has to walk the thing back to the thing, then how does she get back to the car? She leaves it right beside the car because she uses it as a walker.
But this is where I'm going with it, though. This is where I'm going with it. So I saw someone take one that was out of place and put it, kind of where it belonged. And right after that, someone else did the same thing. And then someone else. Because they were influenced by someone else's behavior, and I think it's the little ripples. We're influenced every day. How many of you have been at a restaurant trying to decide what it is that you want to eat?
And then you see the food go by.
Right. Yeah. The person either you see something go by and you say, "What is that?" Or the person sitting across from you orders something and you say, "That sounds good. I think I'll try that too." And then I'm thinking to myself, I want you to get something different so that I can steal off of your plate. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I do, actually. And then I have this competition in my head about who chose the better dish. That's a story for a different day. But yes, Jessica, this is not like Robert's example is exactly like this, right? Is anybody going to like videotape a bunch of people being good Samaritans and putting grocery carts away? No, those people are not going to go viral. But in that moment, and we've all done this, right? We've done that little thing. We've stood up for an elderly person so they can sit on the bus. We've opened doors for people. We have done things that are just like things we would do, right? It's those every presentation of that is an opportunity to create a ripple. And you're right, Sam. That first person who did it made you. That first person became an influencer because the second person did it, right? And that's just it. Oh, there's a TED
Talk. What? She's right. That is a TED Talk. You know what? After I do my TED Talk, I'll give you credit, Samina. Oh God, I'm just gonna mess up her name. Her blah blah.
Samina. Her friends call her Sam.
Oh, thank you, Sam. That is a really good TED Talk, though, and yeah.
Well, and I just think I want to just quickly go back to before we run out of time, because there was a conversation in the chat about followers, right? And Nicole had said something about like people who follow, and then Dan was like, "That's not true," and they ended up agreeing. But the point is that we also have our own perceptions of what a follower is and what being a follower means, right? And there's in society, we glorify leaders and not so much the followers. Or maybe in some arenas, it's even frowned upon to be a follower, right? Like, our followers don't have this, or followers can't think for themselves, and that's actually not true, right? There are people who I follow because I believe in them. I believe in their cause. I believe in how they show up. I want to be a champion for them, but I don't want to be in the spotlight on that stage, right? I'm not the look at me. I sit on boards for charities because I want to contribute what I can and shine a light on the charity. But this is not about me shining a light on myself. And so I think there's an interesting perspective we can challenge for ourselves as well, as when we think about influencers and we think about the type of people who follow people. What stories are we telling ourselves about being a follower? Because yes, there's following mindlessly or following things you don't believe in. There's some things to explore there. But when you're following the things you believe in and you are being a champion, then that is also a reflection of your personal brand and contributes to your potential influence as well.
Yeah, so you've got me thinking about this, and so I think there are probably about three, probably more, three reasons why we follow people. I think we follow people either one because of who they are, or what they do, and or how they make you feel. So who they are, what they do, or how they make you feel. Um, and I think those are some of the reasons that we follow people. I mean, there are famous people that we follow simply because we like them as an actor or actress, or we like the way that they sing. But then there are other people that we follow because, doggone it, we just like the way that they perform magic tricks. So that's what they do. But then there are other people like motivational speakers that we follow simply because they give us a feel good feeling. Um, but I think it's always personal. The reason that we follow people, it's personal and it's situational.
Mm-hmm. You're just saying like so many great things. I need to write them down.
I should probably be writing them down for my
This
TED talk.
I'll send you my notes. This is like because I there's a social post in that I want to make, but this is so true, right? And it's I think especially on a platform like LinkedIn where a lot of the conversation is focused around following people for what they do.
Right.
We forget that. I mean, I could say this is 100% true for me. The people who choose me as a coach don't choose me because of what I do. It's important for them to know what I do,
Right.
but they choose me because of who I am and because of how I make them feel. I had a conversation with a lady yesterday, and she said, like, the nicest thing, she's like, this. So she's in a career transition, and she's like, this is the calmest I've been since 2017. And I was like, this is like the greatest compliment I feel like I could ever get. Because and this is just somebody who I'm like chatting with on it, like on a coffee chat, right? This is that's the thing. And we all feel, right? You're here today because you were like, I like Tracy, or I like Rob, or I need a hit of energy today because you know that's what you can get here, right? This and like this concept is interesting and it's a good conversation, right? But that's a contributing factor, but it's not the whole thing. And in a lot of the conversations I have with people, they get so stuck in like, what I need to have this one, like I need to have a show and it's got to be this one perfect thing, right? Like, what's going to be the title? It has to say all things to all. And you're like, it's not a thing, right? Like, it's not a thing. Just show up and people buy from you because you are who you are and you have your insight and you have your angle, and show them that.
So I have the ultimate story that reiterates what you just said. So I'm sitting here with you now, and people probably don't know me because I'm not famous and I'm not an influencer. But
And I didn't even tag you in this post so people could learn about you, but I will after.
right. So for me, I am and Tracy's gonna laugh when I say this because she laughs every time I say it, but I'm a certified public accountant and I hate numbers. I like people. And what I do is I teach accounting and auditing professionals soft skills, how to get along with other people. But while working as an auditor one day, I just finished auditing somebody, and right, that's like being oh, never mind. I'm not gonna. That's a horrible feeling to be audited, right? So I'm sitting across the table from this guy, and I really liked him and respected him, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, Robert, I really hate what you do." I was like, oh, it was just a shot to the heart, and somebody was to blame. Um, somebody will get that joke, but anyway,
You give love
there you go.
badly. I got it.
But
quote Bon Jovi all day. That's good.
right. But no, it was a real shot to the heart, and I think he saw the look on my face because it was like, and he said, "But you know what? I like the way you do it." And so that made me feel better, but also it made me think, okay, if you can take a profession like mine and make people actually not like what it is that you do, but respect the way that you do it, you must have something here. And I think that's really what we're getting to. There are a million people that can do what it is that we do. People will select us because they like what we do. And I'll give you another story. I don't know if you remember one of the first times I showed up to your it was the second time I showed up to your what is networking with that. What's the
No
thing
pitch
that you,
networking,
thank you, no pitch network. See, I don't even know the name of it. But I don't know if you
which
remember
is
the second
irrelevant.
time the second time I showed up and you have us go around and you have us introduce ourselves. And I said, I'm just here because Tracy told me to be here. Right? I mean, it's just people like us. And then what we do is actually a bonus. So if you can find someone who does something and you actually like that person, then that's a imagine liking your doctor or liking your auditor or I mean, you know.
And this is kind of unfair to auditors because I can't imagine liking my auditor, but it is possible. I like my doctor. Okay. And this is the same relationship I have with my dentist, right? Like I have to go to the dentist. But Nicholas actually, like we moved over the summer and we moved to a new town. So it's like we need a new dentist, something that's closer. And Nicholas had like the worst anxiety at the new dentist. So I called the old dentist in the city. I was like, can we come back? Because like this is terrible. And he went back to the old dentist and he's totally fine. Right. So
yeah,
these are the things. It's not just the dentist, it's that person as a dentist and how they influence you, right? Do they make you feel safe? Do they make you feel comfortable? In the online space, do they make you feel heard? Do they make you feel like a human and not a robot? Right? These are things that are important to me. And also something that's
no, go ahead,
Robert.
Go ahead. No, I was about to make a snarky quip. I was about to say, although auditors have been described as robots, so it's
so it all comes together in the end. Yeah. So what I was going to say is normally I will just go long, but today I have to take my grandma to the doctor. So I have to finish on time. And before we wrap up, Andrew had this really great comment, which I think is a great way to wrap up this conversation. The live, any live or this live in particular, is an influence. It's then down to the listener, watcher, on how you use the information. I don't get to control how you use any of this information today, nor do I want to control how you use this information today. This is about Tracy and Robert hanging out, putting information out into the world to which you can either say yay or nay. And if you want to do something with the information that you learned today, stay in the conversation, right? If you're in this conversation and your brain is saying, I'm not an influencer, I don't know who's watching, who's not in the chat, but I see who's in the chat and I can give you at least one example of somebody you have influenced. And Sam said, it's the first follower that makes you an influencer, which means, and I know a lot of you are parents as well, right? So like you are an influencer. And what could it look like today if you approached your day as a powerful influencer instead of just a person on social media? This is my challenge for all of you today. Robert, thank you so much for just randomly accepting, one offering, because literally this conversation would not have been as good without you and your perspective. It's good in the chat, but it's better in person. And thank you everybody who took up my challenge in the chat to actively get in the chat. This is how we get to try on these ideas. Like, what do we think about it? What do we think an influencer is? What do we think a follower is? We don't give ourselves the time and the space to even think about our own opinions of these things and how our story about that might be stopping us from achieving some of our own potential. And whether that is in a business or just your human potential, hopefully what we have given you today is a little bit of energy and a little bit of time. Oh, look who's here. Woo! Marie-France, but we must have got the time zone wrong because...
Okay. I'm out.
No, it's fine.
No, stay. What do you mean?
I will follow up with Marie-France, and we will do a follow-up episode about how we're all influencers, because literally this was her idea of a title for a show. So I want to have that conversation with her as well. But thank you, Robert, for just saying like, yep, I'm gonna do this. This is how we give ourselves the opportunity to create those little ripples, right? So thank you. You created a bunch of ripples today. Thank you to everybody else. Please stay in the conversation. Check out the other people who are in the chat. Connect with them if you're not already connected. Connect with me. Connect with Rob. I'll do a post that tags him, although he's also in the chat earlier, so you can just click on his name and connect with him. Stay in the conversation about how you can be the influencer that you were always meant to be. Thank you so much, everybody. And until next time, permission to do you.